Hello and welcome to Daily Dose Radio, a 5-minute-a-day podcast studying the Psalms verse by verse, recorded here in the dining room of the Bible Bistro, located in Sharonville, Ohio. Hey there friends, welcome back to Daily Dose Radio, here in the Bible Bistro. Come on in and sit down and join me today as we open our Bibles up to Psalm 51. This psalm doesn't need very much of an introduction because it is so famous. Most everyone knows Psalm 51. It's not quite as famous as, like Psalm 23 or maybe Psalm 1 or Psalm 119, but it is rather famous because of the honesty and the historicity of this particular psalm. It's just wonderful that we have so much history with these psalms, and they connect so nicely and on purpose to the history that we find in the Holy Scriptures. And today, this is no exception because Psalm 51 comes right out of 2 Samuel chapter 12. So if you want some background on the psalm, if you've never read Psalm 51 before, go back and look at 2 Samuel chapter 12. And actually, our introduction sets it up for us because in the introduction we have of the choir master, a psalm of David, when Nathan the prophet came to him about the matter concerning Bathsheba when he went to her. So you'll read about what the Lord said to Nathan, how he presented that parable to David of the poor man and the rich man and the one precious ewe lamb that the poor man had. And you'll see that, and then David's repentance is described there. But it's wonderful that we have this psalm which sets it in such a beautiful light and gives us so much information about repentance and about redemption and about forgiveness and about the proper use of religion. So we're going to look today at verses 1 through 4. That'll get us started for the week. There are 17 different imperatives here that David uses when speaking with God, and he's not commanding God to do something, he's pleading for God to do something. And we begin here in verse 1. He says, "Have mercy upon me, O God, according to thy loving kindness, according to the multitude of thy tender mercies, blot out my transgressions. Wash me thoroughly from mine iniquity, and cleanse me from my sin. For I acknowledge my transgressions, and my sin is ever before me. Against thee only have I sinned, and done that which is evil in thy sight, that thou mightest be justified when thou speakest, and be clear when thou judgest." So verses 1 through 4 set up for us the remainder of the psalm, and here we have David pleading with the Lord to have mercy on him, blot out his transgressions, wash him from iniquity, cleanse him from sin. So these are the imperatives that he uses here, and a couple of them are repeated. Cleansing is repeated again there in verse 10. Blotting out is repeated there again in verse 9. Washing is repeated there in verse 6. So David uses these same ideas over and over again as he constructs this psalm for us. You'll notice that he begins with verse 1, "Have mercy." And he asks for mercy, notice, according to loving kindness, according to tender mercy. And he says, the multitude of thy tender mercy. You see, we don't go to God and ask for mercy based on something that we have built up or stored up because of our goodness. There's no such store available. You can't go to God and say, "I'm a pretty good guy, have mercy on me." God's going to look at you and say, "No, you're not. There's none good, no, not one. There's none righteous, no, not one." So David comes to God and he pleads with him to have mercy, according to his mercy, not according to David's goodness, and to blot out his transgression according to the same. He says, "Wash me from my iniquity, cleanse me from my sin." And of course we have such a beautiful imagery here because when something gets real dirty, what do you have to do with it? You have to cleanse it. You have to wash it. Yeah. "For I acknowledge my transgressions, and my sin is ever before me." Here we have repentance beginning for David. I acknowledge my transgression. It's not somebody else's transgression, it's my transgression. And then notice verse 4, he says, against thee have I sinned. Now, it's true that he sinned against Uriah, and he sinned against Bathsheba, and he sinned against his nation, the people that he was king over, and he sinned against Joab and the men of the army who were confederate with him in the murder of Uriah. He sinned against all those people. But in the end, who is it that tells us what sin is? Well, it's none other than the Lord. And so when we sin, yes, we may sin against others, but friends, in the final accounting, our sin is against Him, because God is the one who has told us what sin is. Against thee and thee only have I sinned and done this evil in thy sight, that thou mightest be justified when thou speakest and clear when thou judgest. It's not that God needs David's permission to judge. He doesn't need David's permission at all. David's just saying to him, look, I've sinned against you, so you have a right to judge me. You have a right because I've done it. I admit it. It's my transgression. And whatever you do, I'm not going to complain about it. It's, you are the one who are making this. You go back to 2 Samuel chapter 12 and look at verse 13, and you'll find something similar there. Compared to verse 4 here in Psalm 51. Well, I've gone way over my time, but we'll pick up right here tomorrow in verse 5, and we'll do verses 5 through 8, here on Daily Dose Radio. Thanks for listening to Daily Dose Radio. For more fresh and delicious Bible studies, podcasts, books, and more, check out the Bible Bistro online and on YouTube. Join me again next time for Daily Dose Radio.